Okay, we are recording. Peter, how are you today?
I am very well, Stu. Happy to be chatting with you today.
Lovely.
How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm all right. It's we're recording this one at the end of the day, so this is quite nice. I've kind of finished all the kind of admin for the day, so I'm relaxed and I'm going to sort of finish off the day with a lovely natter about music, which is
That
one of my
sounds good. I'm watching the London lights come on and the sky get dark, which is always a lovely moody feeling here.
wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's kick things off straight away with the track listings, and I'm going to ask you for track one to tell me the song, uh, please, Peter, that you regard as having the greatest ever intro.
So first of all, this is a difficult one to answer. There are many that came to mind
Everyone says this is a difficult one.
because I have to tell you the one that came to my mind first of all, which isn't the one I chose, was Locomotive Breath. By Jethro Tull.
Mhm.
It's a fucking great intro.
Yeah,
And then loads came to my mind and of all kinds and all genres, because I love, crawling into every genre. But the one I've landed on is Money by Pink Floyd.
lovely. I mean, that's
It's
perfect, right?
I mean it was the first time I ever heard. It's just on so many levels that intro is kind of transcendent.
Yeah,
The use of sound, rhythmic sound, the use of the actual coin itself and the machine of capitalism kind of grinding away into a beat that then becomes a groove. I mean, it's just effortless and
yeah.
and very very telling. So I think I had to go with that because of all of its meanings. But there's so many intros that came to my mind. But if I had to choose one, I'll go with that one.
And that's quite an instant one. When you agreed to do this, I was like, I wonder where he's going to go with this, because I think we'll get into a more of an introduction about you and the record and your journey in a moment. But knowing that you do, the film scores and such, I expected something to be far more vast and to sort of a bit of a journey to get to to, for want of a better description, the money shot of the strong. And it's always really interesting when I speak to musicians on the podcast, that it's always that kind of, they go one way or the other. They just go for something more expansive and the journey into the where it all drops, or they're just like, I was helped by the Beatles, bang, straight in, and I'm always intrigued which side they go on. I think that's where the kind of why everyone says this is the hard one, because I think so many people have got them beautiful intros that, I guess, in the time that we live in now, if you were to take some of these huge intros, like something as simple as Bohemian Rhapsody, and you take
Yeah.
that to a record label now as a pop band, they'd laugh you out the door. They're like, what, 20 seconds and nothing's happened? No chance.
I mean, they were laughed out the door then,
Yeah, yeah,
initially.
yeah, yeah.
So nothing's changed really in that respect.
Yeah,
Truly, I think that I mean, yeah, many Queen intros could have been it. Many Bowie intros could have been
yeah,
it. And then some classical, preludes to operas came to my mind.
yeah,
And so many expansive pieces of music, dance music intros that just blow your mind.
yeah,
As you say, to the drop, it was all about. I mean, intros essentially are just a kind of big old wind up to the drop,
yeah,
and I think Money does that in a just a different way. It's absolutely a propulsion in,
yeah,
but it's got a kind of cynicism. And I think also because I've spent a lot of my life working with sound, and
yeah,
sound, as music people, a lot of the time, I think people forget how we're sound people.
yeah,
And so hearing sound in motion, I've spent a lot of my life putting sound together in rhythmic and musical ways with chords and tones and all kinds of things. So I think that was probably something that I heard as a young teen
yeah,
and was like, okay, you can do that with sound,
yeah.
and I'm and make it into music. That's something I can definitely get my head around.
Lovely. It's really strange. You sort of talking about the sort of sonics of that track, and I guess Pink Floyd pretty much in general. Um, I'm a fan of the band. I'm not a super fan, but if I get new headphones, it sounds ridiculous. If I get new headphones, I always go, right, where's Dark Side? And I listen
Dark
to
Side,
Dark
yeah,
Side of the Moon on
yeah,
headphones
yeah.
to see how good my headphones are.
Everyone's got that record that's their headphone record. A lot of
Absolutely.
producers I've worked with, and I love the fact that it's not even necessarily their taste in music. It's just they trust and they know the mix, and they can just. I have a few, that it's just like, yeah, okay, we're set up, let's work.
Yeah, love it, love it.
Just producers who we trust.
Well, I'd like you to sort of do a bit more while we're talking intros. Introduce yourself a little bit more, because your story is remarkable, and it's a key part of the record that's happening. Tell us a little bit about Recovery, please, Peter.
So Recovery is a record that I'm very lucky to have had a chance to make. I've had a career as a film composer, music producer, working a lot in the film and the TV area, not uniquely, but a lot. And have lots of things to show for that. But I always have gone on my musical journey privately as well, and shared that. And just when I was in the middle of all of that, I got stopped in my tracks, just coming up for over a year and a half ago now, and I suddenly got stopped and had to have emergency and very brutal brain surgery, and it was a complete shocker. I had, being a music person, it was of course my ears that gave it away to me. So I listening to one's body and your ears and trusting that is so important. I hear so many stories about people who, like a guy was meditating, and he realized he was having a heart attack while he was meditating. And if he hadn't listened to his body, it's a really good mate of mine out in LA where I live. And he said if he hadn't listened to his body, he'd absolutely not had a chance of becoming a member of the club that many of us are a member of, which is another chance, the One More Chance Club.
Yeah.
And my situation was I had no choice but to have this surgery, and it was a very rare and strange occurrence that I had, and a long surgery that then I had no certainty of making it through. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I've got a lot of music to make in my life, I've got a lot of love to give, a lot to learn, and I just couldn't bear the thought of that being the end.
And so from an ear problem that you see,
it wasn't an ear problem, but I heard there was something wrong with my brain through the resonance in my head. It didn't sound right. It's like, when you put your headphones on and it doesn't sound right, it didn't sound right in my head.
Wow.
And it took a long time to diagnose what was going on, but it just, I'm a singer obviously, and I was singing, and it just didn't feel right. It was imbalanced, it was resonant, and it took a long time to diagnose what was happening. So eventually, right in the heart of COVID, I having had COVID and essentially coughed my head to smithereens with it. This was out in Los Angeles. I then went to see someone, and from journey to journey, I found a more knowledgeable doctor, until finally I found the man, basically, who understood what was going on with me, and extremely concerned, but very cool. And he said it was time for a craniotomy. I didn't even know what the word craniotomy was. It sounded like a horror movie.
Yeah.
And
I presume it's not actually too far from a horror movie what they do.
It was a horror movie, but it was when something happens to oneself, it's so real that I didn't have a choice, so I just trusted this person, and I put all my trust into him and into his colleague, who was an amazing neurosurgeon. And that's my story. I went into this process. I surrendered. I got my affairs in order, and I knew that if this was it, this was it. But I could only love as much as possible for as long as I could do that. And I never thought that I wasn't going to make it. And I knew that I just had to trust. And music, of course, it's central to my life. It's been central to my life since a very, very young age. I can pinpoint those moments that made me into basically to to devote my life to music. And after the surgery, it was a very long surgery, and afterwards it was a bit like a whole reboot of my brain, somewhere between a reboot and a kind of renaissance, but it was also really disturbing, and I had to start again. I had to kind of build myself up again from scratch. It took about a year, not really being able to move, and certainly hearing was strange, eyesight was strange, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to work again. But I said to my amazing doctor when he came to see me after the surgery, which was very, very long surgery, I said, if you tell me I can work again, the first piece of music is a thank you to you. And he just looked at me so humbly and he said, that would be my honor. I was like, no, that is my honor. Because he knew what I do for a living. And eventually I started recovery. And recovery is something which, in my opinion, is happening all the time to all of us. It's happening to planet Earth. It's happening to every part of us, the regeneration, the ability to be our best selves, the ability to get up again and try better, learn more. You know, it's that for me is recovery, and it can be behaviorally, it can be from, you know, suffering from a grief or from a medical situation like myself, or it could just be a grievance. It can be the littlest or the biggest thing, because from my experience, sometimes the littlest things feel like the biggest things, and the biggest things feel just like they are, which is kind of the way it goes. And it's all about how we manifest ourselves, I think. So for me, I embraced hope, and I embraced trust. And after I started to be able to hear stereophonically and really well, I'm so grateful to say, really well again. And I was just putting together my studio, you know, which was my way of saying I'm gonna see what happens if I can still do this, get back on the horse, the musical horse, so to speak. And out comes a little hook on the piano, on my beautiful piano. And I've often said and thought that when something comes out effortlessly, it's like a friend, it's like a new friend. A little melody, a little piece, a companion, and it often expresses things that words just can't even get close to. And it has this persistence, it has this sense of hope, but it also isn't scared of saying that this is not easy.
Yeah,
this life is not always easy, and I couldn't kind of shake it, so I made it into a thank you piece for my doctors. And that was the beginning of the recovery record. It was a pure, humble thanks. And I sent it to, I recorded on it. The whole recording of it was very kind of improvisational in a way. It was extremely, in a way that the same as just being in the moment of the surgery or the recovery itself, just having a different relationship with a kind of slipstream of music, which I think doing things for other people all the time, it's quite hard to find those slipstreams. But when one is in a survival mode, it's all one big slipstream, if that makes any sense to you, Stu.
absolutely.
So basically, I started this record, and the doctors had this amazing response to it. It wasn't just a thank you from them, it was more than that. And one thing led to another, and people started hearing it, just a few people, and they encouraged me to keep going. So as I started to recover more and more every day, I started to develop this into a full-length record. And I'm proud to say, by the time I got to the end of it, 7 tracks, goes recovery 1.0 to 7.0. By the time I got to 7.0, I was a lot better than when I was 1.0. So the thought of being able to share that space with people, in the hope that they can connect in some way, and with whatever they're going through in their life, that's the privilege for me.
And I feel very privileged that you've come in and you've just shared that. Like, it's a remarkable story, and thank you so much, Peter, for saying that. We'll pick back up on the record towards the close of the podcast, but I'm going to take you back now. I mean, it's a very emotional thing you just said there, so it kind of fits very nicely with the next question. I'm going to ask you to go back and tell me the first song that you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Well, again, brilliant questions of tracks. I'm picking David Bowie Changes. It was that I think it switched me on. It didn't just have an emotional impact, it turned me on.
Yeah.
And I'm still on.
Yeah.
I never went off. And it woke me up out of my, young, early pre-teenage slumber. And it took me out of my kind of self and showed me that there's just this, I just hadn't heard anything like it before. And the kind of celebration and the commiseration all at once. I just couldn't believe that clash of wonderment and the production, everything about it, just the massiveness of that chorus, the honkiness, the honky tonkiness. It just grabbed me, and I absolutely think that piece, that has to be the one. It has to be Changes.
Tell me the emotion, if you had to pinpoint it, Peter, that you got hearing that.
I think it's this feeling of disorientation and this feeling of bewilderment. Don't know what I'm going through, I just don't know what I'm going through. And then this reassurance, which is the overriding chorus feeling, reassurance that it's okay to be changing. It's okay to be in flux.
Yeah.
And let's sing about that kind of weirdness and pain and disorientation. Be okay with not being okay.
Yeah. And I mean,
and I think that is, I don't know if that describes the emotion okay, but I have to say it's this feeling of, of celebrating the pain.
Yeah.
In a kind of upbeat way. And I think it's a mixture of emotions, but that's kind of how I felt.
And aside from sort of sonically, tell me about the impact as a young lad seeing David Bowie, because what a remarkable thing to look at. Whatever he was changing into, because he evolved constantly, and every single time it was just something he looked astonishing. And I mean, as a young lad, I kind of caught him around, I guess, Les Dance, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, will you look at this guy? He's remarkable. And tell me about the visual impact of an artist like David Bowie on a young Peter.
I mean, it was an astounding impact it had on me. It was this visual sonic spectacle in one. It was a creature. He was a creature that was so alive and so unashamed to be himself. Yeah. And I think so many artists credit him as giving them license to be who they wanted to be.
Absolutely.
Not who they were expected to be. And I think we witnessed so much people trying to sound like other people, trying to be like other people, trying to look like other people.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of pressure there is.
Yeah.
And I feel like he broke that mold, whether he was miming or whether he was, he had his red shoes on in Let's Dance. He was always just himself, and he was always acting. He was always being, and I was always so interested in his inner self. And I think so I always found there was a big discrepancy sometimes between his performance and his inner being. And as I studied him more and more and got to learn more about him and got to meet him one time, I saw that he's, a very vulnerable person who never stood still.
Yeah.
And I just found he was an ongoing piece of theatre, and he never stops for me. It never stops. It's
never got boring, did he? He never got boring.
He never got boring, right up until his passing. And I wish we weren't talking about him in the past tense, because it never feels real when people like him, transcend.
Absolutely. Let's keep it in the formative years, and I'm going to ask you for track three to tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
Again, I mean, the journey from there was so many because there was different parts of my life then, and there was
You
you
can have
know
some honourable mentions.
I thought, for a minute, I thought it was going to be the Cramps. You got good taste.
Oh,
I
lovely.
thought you got good taste was going to take it, and it did. And then I listened back to it, and I was like, that is definitely big area, and there was so much influence in those days you know, from the kind of the post punk era, really. But again, what came and shook me and knocked me and never left me, the records that were on my Walkman, Sony Walkmans, proper cassette Walkmans, on those two buses to school and two buses back, it was Hendrix. It's got to be Hendrix. And I was loving the music that was going on at that point, but it didn't have the um the intrinsic wildness of Hendrix that I was looking for, that was reflecting what the kind of rebel in me was feeling, the budgeting musician in me. And it was very neat and tidy, a lot of the music going on around then. Or
Yeah.
and I just so yeah, so I'm going for Foxy Lady because I think it also it awakens the kind of sexuality of a teenager. It's so alive, and he's so um virile,
Yeah.
and I was shy, actually, at that point in my life. I was shy. So hearing this, it's like, come on. And when I could play that stuff, I could play those riffs, I could sing those riffs, I could sing them, and I could, and it was just being able to embody that character of this inner kind of sexual confidence that was so un-English.
And you're right insofar as, that kind of, so much of that stuff that come in that post-punk scene was quite clean and cold and clinical and didn't have that looseness that you get from, the wildness of Jimi Hendrix. I completely get what you're saying. And them buses, going home, where was home?
So home in those days was London.
Mm.
Home now is LA. I was born in South Africa, and but I've been a Londoner for most of my life.
Fond memories of growing up in London?
Very mixed memories of growing up in London, but very, a lot of, we were immigrants in London, and we were made to feel at home some of the time and less at home. It was a very, an interesting, I've got an interesting background because I was born into apartheid South Africa, and that's where I was. It was a really tricky time to be born there.
Yeah.
And then we moved to London when I was young. So, but yeah, I mean, very fond memories of London. I think London's like nowhere else, and I feel very proud to be from London. But it had some edgy times for sure in those days. It was, it had all kinds of different. It didn't feel like the safest time in the world.
Yeah.
It didn't feel, but I needed to be out on the streets. I couldn't be inside,
Yeah.
I had to see what was going on and listen to the music of the streets.
Did you enjoy school?
I struggled at school. I really did. I had some fun. I was at an all boys school, which was kind of not my scene. And there's a lot of macho stuff going on, and I'm not really into that.
Yeah.
I never was. I struggled actually with some academic stuff, and others I flourished in. So I was very imbalanced at the school, but I made the most of it. I think I struggled a little bit at school, actually. I was a late bloomer.
Was you a creative kid?
I was creative, certainly creative with music. And with kind of English and writing and stuff. I couldn't do any science. I was just useless. I was always disorientated, which is probably why the Bowie track always helped me, because I was useless at geography. In fact, I said to my neurosurgeon, while you're there, will you sort out my GPS, because it's dreadful. It's horrendous. And he said, you see what you can do. I'm not sure he got around to that. There's other more urgent stuff to do. So I did struggle to feel at home in some ways, but I also got by and always connected with good people. Occasionally got in with the wrong people.
Yeah.
I think we all like to try different things.
Absolutely.
But for me, for example, there was, I couldn't do anything to do with violence at school. And to me, all of these kind of clubs, they were violent or they were to do with maps. I just couldn't do it. So, I persuaded them to let me set up the music society. And that was it. Then it was all good.
So did you know what you wanted to do when you was at school?
No.
Did music seem like a viable option?
No, not really. I mean, my grandfather was an opera singer, but he was told to get a proper job before he could marry my granny. So no, I mean, there was no security in it. There's musicians in my family, for real. Like, there's lots of people who devote their life to music, but it didn't. I mean, I don't think my parents were thinking that could be practical to actually earn a living through music. And I think they thought I would just grow out of it.
Yeah.
And I was asked to join bands when I was 14, 15 to go on the road because I could keep a rhythm. That's all you needed in those days. Is if you can stay in time, you're in.
Yeah.
And I could stay in time. Because that was basically all that, that's all you need to be able to help create a backbeat.
So was home musical?
It was not a musical as my home. I've got a musician wife and I've got kids, and we're always I think we're a musical home in the truest sense of the word. We're singing, we are playing. There was music around, certainly a lot of classical music, a lot of opera. My sister is a really good pianist and played the violin. I was much more rebellious around all this stuff, so it became very musical once I started playing. But so for me, once I discovered music, once the hunky dory and the Hendrix started to, and the Pink Floyd and just all the, even Jeff Beck, who died last week. I mean, all the greats. I studied all the greats. Just and I didn't think I was studying them. I just was absorbing them. Peter Green, the original guitarist from Fleetwood Mac. I mean, he blew my mind in a way so early on. And just the soulfulness of amazing people. I got that then became my addiction, and so for me it was very musical because it was all going on in my bedroom. But it didn't go. But I had a friend, he's still one of my closest mates, and his dad had a rocking record collection, a really good one. I mean, I don't know how much. I've got quite a lot of records now, and I'm not sure how they would weigh up, but it felt like he had a sea of vinyl.
Yeah.
And I'd go there every day after school and we would just start mucking into it. So I went seeking out like any good hunter would.
Yeah. Wonderful.
We got through his dad's records one by one and we just discovered gem after gem after gem.
Well, let's talk records. What was the first record you bought from a record store?
Well, I think it's either because I haven't got that anymore. I think it's either Easy Lover, maybe A Guilty Pleasure, which is by the Philip Bailey and the Philip Collins people. You may remember that one. Do you remember that one?
Oh, Easy Lover. That's an incredible record.
It's funny how it is a cracker. So Easy Lover grabbed me because it's got a big old sting to it. And it's like, what is an Easy Lover? I didn't know what Easy Lover was. So I think Easy Lover, and then I think it may have gone very close to Hot Chocolate, You Sexy Thing.
Oh, I mean, two absolutely.
Those two, I think hand by hand. And I did try, it was Ultravox and Depeche Mode. I was really into those bands and all that. But there's just no, I know, it didn't, the first two, I would say. I think Past the Duchy was also around that time. That grabbed me.
I remember seeing an interview with him on Newsround. And I remember saying that they didn't have to go to school. And I was thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to be in a band. So when I'm like 14, I haven't got to go to school. I can be like the kids at Grange Hill or Musical Youth. Oh, wonderful.
How was school for you?
Classic in between. Told the careers teacher I wanted to be a rock star. He told me to get a proper job. Then I told him I wanted to be a stuntman. Then I got asked to leave the office. Let's talk Easy Lover because no one's mentioned that on this podcast, and we're 470 episodes in now, and it's such a perfect pop record. And Phil Bailey wasn't the vocalist in Earth, Wind and Fire, was he? But he was, I think, the guitarist in Earth, Wind and Fire. I think, or he was definitely. Yeah. But if you've got that guy in your band and he's not the singer, it shows how good the singer in Earth, Wind and Fire is, because Phil Bailey's falsetto on that track is absolutely amazing. It's huge, overblown pomp 80s production, isn't it? And it's so punchy. It's incredible. And that's obviously Phil Collins as he's starting to kind of maybe move away from Genesis and become a pop star rather than a prog star. Glorious record.
I think Phil Bailey was what did sing for Earth and Wind. I think he was. I think from my memory there was two singers.
Right. Okay.
So I think he was more than. I mean, I think there were two. Because I remember seeing the two of them. They used to just stack all their vocals.
Yeah.
So I think there were two of them that were.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure that he was. But yeah, I mean, there was that. I don't know what that record was. It was electric. It was electric, and they were just so on it.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great time for pop music as well. You talk about Depeche Mode, and huge fan because they're Essex boys, and they're
of course,
and they cut their teeth. They were a resident band in my nightclub back in the day, and so I'm fiercely proud of them and watching them evolve from a pop band into something so much darker and sinister and the early Ultravox records as well, like sonically phenomenal. And what was it? It was Philip Bailey, and what was the other one you chose?
The Hot Chocolate.
Hot Chocolate. Ah, what a perfect piece of pop disco.
You must have had that a few times, or not?
No,
really,
no, not had it yet.
I mean, again, that track is another. I think a lot of these, that's why it's so interesting to answer your thoughts, because it was like what switched me on.
Yeah.
When did the lights start turning?
Yeah.
From kind of like red to green.
Yeah.
And I think that Hot Chocolate is another. All these records, I mean, to be honest, they're all very just kind of comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
And
that's a great way to describe it.
And I think that's what I was searching for, because I probably wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I think whether it's Foxy Lady or Easy Lover or they're just these productions that just had such good vibes, and I think that's what I was responding to, because I didn't need to necessarily hear people moaning. I was probably moaning enough by myself.
Yeah.
So I was just, and I've always been fascinated by what just when music can just turn things around, same as people can. There was someone in my work yesterday, and I was having like a serious day, and her smile just completely turned the day around for me. And I think mine for her. It's like, that's what music can do. It's just that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, we're talking good times. Let's go clubbing. Tell me the song that soundtracked them for you.
I mean, that is probably the trickiest of the lot, because I have different me's and different times of my life, different decades where different things were happening. And different, different episodes, because obviously when I was up in Manchester for a good long while and a very formative time in Manchester history.
Oh my God, was you there at the late 80s, early 90s?
I was in the 90s.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Right, early 90s. So I was there at a critical time. But before we go there, and then the list is endless there, obviously. But it was actually, I think, and it's not an English outfit, but there was a track I remember hearing in the WAG Club in London.
Oh, shout out the WAG Club. Oh,
I heard it in the WAG, and I swear to God, it was like, this is the coolest shit I've ever heard. And I just was on that dance floor with a bunch of friends and all these lovely people that I'd never met and was never going to meet again, but we were all just in it. And that's the feeling that when you are that I go back to. I must have been 16, so pretty young to be at the WAG Club. But Gene Knight, Mr. Big Stuff.
Oh, what a record.
And remixes of, because there was plenty of DJ remixes going on at that day where already people were starting to chunk it out.
Yeah. Oh,
and Mr. Big Stuff, it's just right from the off. It is And I think it's also just maybe it's also just about, a woman just saying, don't get you too big for your
Yeah,
boots. We're
yeah,
not all that.
yeah,
And I think I needed to hear that. I think we all did.
yeah. I mean, if we're going to start throwing cool points around, so you cut your teeth at 16 in the WAG,
Yeah,
and then a few years later, you're hobnobbing around the Hacienda.
I was hiding,
Come
hiding,
on, that's too cool for
hiding,
school.
hiding in the hacienda, hiding in the hacienda. We before it opened to make sure we got in because it was the absolute heyday. Hiding in, we hid in little places, became friends with it, and it was phenomenal. I mean, it wasn't like anything else. It's not like there's one track though that I would like to talk about because it was an entire
Yeah.
world. It was a
If you if
whole
you
world.
if you was to put yourself in the middle of the hacienda now with your eyes shut, what would you hear?
I mean, I remember Insomnia hitting me really hard there, the
Yeah,
Faithless track.
yeah,
I remember that track, which wasn't, it was probably more of a come down moment in that
yeah,
night. But I remember that being dropped and in between much harder stuff.
yeah,
And it was just like, because he passed what week before
yeah.
last
Maxi
as well,
Jazz,
did he
yeah,
not? Maxi
yeah,
Jazz passed. So I wanted to mention that as well because, and it was just, I, yeah, it was probably 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning when that came out, and
yeah.
it was a perfect moment. It's
Wonderful.
one of those eternalized club moments. So I'm going to say that one. There was so many beats and so many tunes, and a lot of it was just, you know, it was as well about the DJs
Yeah,
at that point, wasn't it? So, but it was, and I was always so excited when creativity of people um, who were putting things behind records before they knew how to produce
yeah,
remix, because that was the time for
yeah,
I was right there, it taught me my trade, listening. So I
yeah,
was that. So I was actually studying environmental philosophy, believe it or not, but I was learning music in the clubs, playing in bands, and it was from the hardest club stuff to the Manchester stuff to the acid jazz that was all birthing around there as well.
It was a mad time, the early 90s, wasn't it?
It
When
was.
you just rattled them off, and you did go. There was the whole kind of Manchester thing, and then that, and you had that whole UK soul scene as well, with like Massive Attack and Soul to Soul, and the stuff that was
Wow.
going on there, and obviously what Eddie Pillar was doing with acid jazz, and with
Yeah.
Corduroy and
Yeah.
JTQ, and that whole scene was, it was just and you know what? So much of it was British.
Yes.
And it
It
wasn't
was.
until maybe 92 that people cast their eye over to Seattle when guitars took over the world for a bit. But up until then, it was all the biggest music we was hearing was all British music, and
Totally.
so
We, we were
exciting.
we, we were back on top again, and it was coming from every angle,
Yeah,
whether it was programmed or whether it was played. It
yeah,
was all happening. It was such a renaissance time. It was kind of relief of being out the 80s,
yeah,
for me,
yeah,
actually. Even though looking back, there's so many great tunes from the 80s. Yeah, I think there's so many other, there's so many other pieces of music that just from that period, um, that stand out. But yeah, that whole the whole it was when kind of it was the period of time where no one slept,
yeah,
and it was just all happening, and I was so grateful for that. And I was so, I was also hanging out with classical musicians,
yeah,
because I was always into that as well.
yeah,
So I was always embracing, classical musicians were always great clubbers as well. It
yeah.
was a kind of a really nice cocktail of people there at that point, and a wonderful atmosphere of creativity and debauchery.
Love it. Love it. Well, look, I'm going to take you home for this track, and I don't know where home is. So, for track 6, I'm going to ask you to tell me a favourite song from an artist from your home county. Where have you gone for this? South Africa? Have you gone
Well, I've gone
London?
South
Have you...
Africa.
Okay.
I've gone South Africa. I could have I mean, I probably avoided some of the more obvious things about England because I can be sure that the pieces closest to my heart are closest to a lot of people's hearts.
Sure.
But I always call, Cape Town in South Africa is called the Mother City. That's its actual name, Mother City. And it has an incredible musical tradition. South Africa has an amazing musical tradition. And there's a piece of music by for me, the queen, the queen of South African music, Miriam Makeba. And she sings a song called Nomeva. And it's just the warmth, the joy, the pain, the precision. It's all there. And I just wanted people to hear that. So I'm going for one of her less obvious pieces, so people can discover that. Nomeva by Miriam Makeba.
Beautiful. And while you're recommending, let's keep that ball rolling for track 7. And this is your opportunity to introduce someone to something new. Furthermore, and for that question, I'm going to ask you please to tell me a song that you think many of our listeners will not know that you would like them to hear.
So I struggled with this one, and in the end, I love it when we hear human voices doing what we're not necessarily expecting them to do. I always find that very exciting. And one of the great classical composers, Gabriel Fauré, his masterpiece Pavane, but performed by Bobby McFerrin. And Bobby McFerrin, for me, always, like, again, he switched me on to another whole and never stops doing so. It wasn't just, don't worry, be happy, which is also a great message to hear when but it was just this whole world of sounds and tones and beats. So much influence he's had on a world of music. But he more than tried his hand working with classical music. And Pavane, with him on lead, is for me a very, very beautiful piece of music. So I would love people to give that a whirl.
I will make it easy for them to do that, because we put together a Spotify playlist to accompany the pod, so people can go and check out all of your picks, as well as Recovery. So where are we at with it at the moment? What's coming up? What's the plans for the rest of 2023?
Well, 2023 is still luckily a young person of the year, so we're just getting going. I'm here to chat with you, which is a great privilege. We've got 3 tracks out already, but in February the other 4 are going to come out, and I'm quite excited about the whole offering, because it really is one experience. You can pick and choose what you want, but it works as a whole, I think. So that's going to come out, and there's some beautiful images that have been shot to go with those 3 of those pieces of music, for people to be able to kind of really get embraced by that feeling. And it was a great experience to be on the other side, and instead of working as a composer for directors, to work with a wonderful director who made beautiful work, very tactile and symbolic work. We wanted to work with shadows, and we wanted to work without gender or without race as much as possible, and just go work with symbols. And we very much did that completely. And so I'm very proud of that work, and proud of the people that did that, very grateful. And there's going to be a little bit of live work happening around Recovery, and we're just gonna just talk about it more and more, and try and share it. I'm gonna have a website as well, where people can write to me with their experience of their recovery,
wonderful.
to open up a dialogue that can be any kind of recovery. It really can. I mean, we hear about hardships every day, don't we? Of any kind. And I really emphasize, this is not a medical record at all. That's just one form of taking life one day at a time, so that we don't try and do too much. And so it's just the beginning of sharing it with the world, and I'm excited to kind of so people will be able to write to me, and I will write back to them in the form of music, in the form of words, and just really try and open up the discussion so that we can feel comfortable, and help each other through the difficult times.
Beautiful. So people can go and hear three of the tracks currently on Spotify. Yeah. We'll add them to the playlist. If people want to see the images that you've just spoken about, where's the best place for people to go and capture?
They can go onto YouTube to Raeburn Recovery Music, and they'll find them right there.
Wonderful. We'll add the link to the show notes so people can find it.
Thank you so much,
Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. What a remarkable story, and it's always an absolute joy to talk records with people. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing me back to those special places in my life, and it's been really great to have a chill out with you. Lovely. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere. All right.